Hey everybody, HexLex here, coming at you with some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel videos. Although you might notice in this one I'm actually not in Master Duel. I may have the music playing in the background, but no, we are not actually going to be in Master Duel today. Today, rather, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be looking at some of the, what I would consider the Tier 1 decks of Master Duel. Now, I do have to get ahead of maybe some of the potential comments here. I am not an expert in all of these decks. Only the ones that I've played I am really even somewhat knowledgeable about. Even Tri Brigade Zodiac, which is my main deck, I am still feel like I'm learning things about it every day. So, you know, when it comes to evaluating these decks that I haven't played personally, I've only played against, I might say some things that are incorrect. If I do, you know, honestly, feel free to let me know in the comments, because one of the ways I'm always looking to improve at any game I play, but especially competitive ones like Master Duel, where I'm laddering and playing competitively. And one of the ways that I've improved, honestly, is by your guys' comments. Like, seriously, I get some pretty good advice about not only making the YouTube videos, but about potential, like, plays I could make or a combo I might have missed. And yeah, I'd love to see that. So, yeah, feel free to let me know if I make any mistakes. I'm sure I'm bound to make at least one. But hey, let's just go right into it. So, we're actually at the Road of the King website, where it's a generally useful Yu-Gi-Oh! Tool, especially if you play OCG and or TCG. It's really good for sharing, like, the metagame, right? And they started doing the Master Duel metagame. You can see that this was published, like, around the time... Actually, it looks like a few days after Master Duel came out, but they've been updating the list as well. It was updated just yesterday. It is February 1st, the date that I'm recording this. So, yeah, we have a little metagame analysis here. We can just kind of gloss over it, but you can see from the highlighted cards, you know, we're looking at... this is telling the difference between the OCG format that the Master Duel ban list is loosely based on and the actual ban list. So... yep, this game, if you didn't know, it actually uses a ban list from the Japanese version of the game, which is the OCG, specifically the April 2021 format. However, the differences are that Rapier, Barrage, and Mystic Mine are banned, and Zeus is limited. Holy cow, could you imagine this format with Rapier and Barrage? Like, oh my god, Zodiacs would be insane. And of course, it's also definitely not a bad thing that Mystic Mine is gone. So, I mean, if we scroll through here, you know, there's some general advice on the game, but let's actually just go ahead and go down to this part, which I find interesting. So, the top 5 decks are the ones that they recommend for laddering if you want to hit Platinum 1. They say it takes about 50 games for the Tier 1 decks. I'd say that was fairly accurate. Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't that long. I think mine was closer to 100, to be honest. But as the guide mentions, all of these decks that are here listed hit Platinum within about 100 games, so or Platinum Tier 1. So really any of the decks on this list, and you can see there's over 80, like holy cow, there's one for like every archetype, which really goes to show you can get, you know, Plat 1 with just about any deck. You do not have to be playing a Tier 1 deck, but it's useful to know which decks are Tier 1, not only if you're interested in trying one, but even if you're playing like one of these rogue decks, it's still good to know what your toughest matchups or what your most common matchups are going to be. So I think in that regard, again, either way, it's good to do your due diligence on doing research on the Tier 1 decks. But enough talking about the Tier 1 decks, let's actually look at some of them. And the first one here, it's everyone's old friend, Elderlich. Yeah, this Elderlich is based off of looks like an OCG build. It's definitely a little bit different than the ones you tend to see in Master Duel. The Master Duel variants tend not to play Reasoning and Lava Golem. And I've seen a little bit of Lava Golem, but not a whole lot. I've not seen any Reasoning, to be honest, in Master Duel. There's the Elderland as well. And yeah, I mean, this all looks pretty standard. I don't know why I pointed out Elderland specifically. It's because it's got the semi-limited 2 there, just drew my attention. But yeah, I mean, this list looks fairly solid. There's, of course, the extra deck, which Elderlich never uses. You could honestly just put 15 throwaway cards in here. Obviously, the ones listed here are, like, optimal, because they have uses at least. But, I mean, again, it's Elderlich. They don't really use the extra deck. But honestly, the main difference from this variant that I see from versus the ones that I see online, instead of reasonings, I tend to see like rivalry of the warlords. Like I tend to just see more back row, which kind of makes sense in the best of one Master Duel format, right? Because stun decks in this format, what they're really trying to do are just shut the opponent down, and in doing that, we either secure the win or like a frustrated concede from our opponent. And in that regard, we typically want to be opening by setting like at least 3 back row, but usually like 4 or 5 if possible. So I understand the decision to cut stuff like Reasoning and Lava Golem. I do think that is definitely better in more of like a traditional like best of 3 format. Funnily enough, I've actually considered building Elderlich because, like, I mean, the only Ultra cards you really have to craft are the Golden Lords himself. If you guys really want to see me play Elderlich, feel free to let me know in the comments. I've kind of held off on it because I feel like maybe a lot of people wouldn't like me to, like, I just feel like people would think it's a boring deck to watch, which I think the deck is fine and perfectly valid as a deck to play, but I just don't know if it's something you guys want to see. So if you really, really, really want to see me play Elderlich, let me know and I'll do it. I mean, I don't know really what else there is to say about this deck. It's a fairly standard stun deck. You're really just trying to hide behind your golden boys. I keep forgetting this isn't actually duel master or master duel, so like I can't click and like highlight the effects, which is what I keep trying to do, and it doesn't help that I have the music going. But yeah, I mean, you know, there's not a whole lot to say, right? Really, is there about Elderlich? You get your golden lords out, you control the board with traps, you hit your opponent with your golden lords, and they're really sad because they can't do anything. So next is Drytron, right? Drytron. So this looks like a fairly standard Drytron list compared to what you would see on Master Duel. I don't know if I see all of them play Cyber Emergency. I've definitely seen some, but yeah, I mean, this looks fairly standard. Again, from what I know about Drytron, which I only know playing against them, right? So one of the appeals, of this deck is, like, I talked in previous videos about, right, there's combo decks and control decks, but there's not only combo and control decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's also like a spectrum, right? Where decks tend to lie somewhere mostly on some part of the combo control spectrum. Drytron is one of those decks that can actually kind of move freely up and down the combo and control spectrum, right? It can be a full, and it often is, like a full-blown combo deck that's playing like 20 cards in a single turn and ending on a board with a bunch of huge monsters. Sorry, I'm playing with rubber bands. Sorry if that was annoying to anybody. But it can also kind of pivot and go into a controlling position where you can get Herald of Ultimateness, or I've seen some of the builds use Herald of Perfection. And you can just kind of sit on that, and you can just keep negating your opponent's stuff by using Eva to add like Herald of Orange Lights and other fodder for your Herald to negate things. So, I mean, and then also on top of that, you also have stuff like Natasha, which is very controlling. It's also a good backup plan in case your main plays get disrupted. I'm noticing this build actually doesn't play any of the actual Drytron ritual monsters, which I think on Master Duel, most variants tend to play one of like the big 4,000 guy that can send cards from the field to the graveyard as a quick effect, right? I tend to see that card in most Drytron decks. But yeah, I mean, otherwise this build looks fairly standard, like from what I know, again. Yeah, so since I don't really have an experience playing with Drytron, I can't give any tips in that regard. But if we're talking about playing against Drytron, one of the cards that you're really going to want to negate the most is this Diviner of the Heralds here, because it's going to send Heralds of, like, the Herald Synchro monster, which is not only going to let them add whatever piece they're missing for their combo, right, because the Drytron cards have to specifically add, like, a ritual monster or a ritual spell, or, like, Ben 10 can only get a fairy, or Eva can only get fairies. But Diviner, by sending the Synchro Herald, can get either a ritual monster or a spell. So it's often their most important search, and it's usually what I like to save my impermanence, or like if you have like an Effect Veiler or Forbidden Chalice. Like that's ideally, I think, the effect you want to be negating. Especially because there are a lot of times I've played against Drytron where you negate this search and then they just have to end their turn after that. Because this Diviner is also often going to take up their normal summon, and they also usually have to do that pretty early into the combo. So by that point they won't have committed too much to the board, and they won't be able to like have a whole lot to come back with. Ideally, I mean, there are times where Drytron is just going to run over you, where you just don't have the hand traps and they're able to get their full combo, including like the Ultimate Herald, right? But yeah, if you're looking for a pretty solid tier 1 deck to play, this one is well, fairly solid. Um, the only things about it doesn't even cost like that many ultra rare craft points. There are a lot of combos to memorize. Like I think this deck is even more combo intensive than like Bird Up, honestly. And that's one of the reasons I also haven't gone into it, is not only having to craft like Diviners, as well as like the Drytron Exceed and the Herald of Ultimateness, not having the ultimate craft points, but also like I'm not saying I will never learn Drytron combos, but I don't feel particularly interested in doing so. Let's just say that. Next up is Virtual World. So this I unfortunately am going to have very little to say about, because I have only played against this deck, I think literally 2 times in all of the laddering I've done. Again, I'm recording this on day 1 of season 2 still, where I've just hit platinum. But yeah, I've only encountered Virtual World like twice. In one game, I think if I remember right, I dropped like a hand trap, and then they just kind of conceded after that. I did have like one full game against Virtual World. I don't even remember who won, to be honest. So as far as like what's standard or not standard about this build compared to like what you typically see on Master Duel, I'm sorry, I don't know. I really just don't know. You know, I know their E-Telly is pretty important to their plays. It's usually what gets them started. I know they often use the crossed out. I remember, or at least I remember getting crossed out. I'm sorry. I wish I had more to say about Virtual World. I really do. I honestly think this is... I don't know if it's... I can't tell if this deck is over or underrated, right? Because I see a lot of people say that it's tier 1, but I haven't seen it a lot myself. And I also have to ask myself if that's variance. But I feel like I've played enough games overall that if this really was like a tier 1 deck in terms of like power and popularity, then I would have seen more of it. Now, it could still be a tier 1 deck in terms of power, it's just not a popular deck. That does happen with card games sometimes, where there are just sleeper decks in the meta that nobody is using that could be tier 1 if more people used it. So maybe that's going on with Virtual World. Maybe it's variance and I just haven't seen very many builds. I'm not too sure. Again, if anyone in the comments wants to give an insight on Virtual World and what tier they think it is, especially if you're a Virtual World player, I would absolutely love to hear from you about this deck. Okay, with that, we're going into Bird Up. Now we're into some decks that I'm a little bit more familiar with. Yeah, I mean, this build looks pretty solid. Looks like we're playing crossout designators in addition to called buys, which I think is pretty good. If I had, you know, all the ultra craft points in the world, I would do the same, honestly. I think I would want to play crossout designators in this deck. Again, in addition to the called buys, just to stop hand traps. You can see this build's only playing 2 Cobalt Sparrow and 1 Wagtail. They've made room for the Psy engine, which I can kind of agree with. You know, I think that this build definitely does not need as many copies of the birds as I'm playing necessarily. Again, if you watched my Road to Plat 1 or Journey to Plat 1 video, you'll know that I actually did end up going down to 2 Cobalt Sparrow, and I put in a Tenki. This build's running 3 Tenki. I think that's a little bit too much, to be honest. I could see using 2 Tenki. I currently have 1, but I think 3 is probably too many. But I also am not as well versed with this deck necessarily as I am with something like Tri Brigade Zoo. Looking at their extra deck, I mean, this is a fairly standard lineup. This is the exact lineup I have too, to be honest. So this was one of the builds that I drew a lot of inspiration from. But as you can see, there's still some key differences, right? I didn't go out of my way to craft Foolish Burial. I kind of thought about it, but honestly, I think I would just play more Tenkis, because really the main thing we're going to want to Foolish is Cobalt Sparrow, and we're already running Fractal as a more versatile Foolish. So I think 3 Tenki and Foolish in addition to Fractals is too much. Again, I'm kind of considering a second Tenki in my build, but I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at now. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. I guess there's not a whole lot for me to say about this build that I haven't already said in like my deck profile and my combo guide. Just know that on the combo control spectrum, this is definitely very much in the combo side of things. It's not a very controlling deck. I mean, it is once you get the full board out, but it is mostly focused on comboing. You are a little weak to hand traps, which again is why ideally I would play 2 called by and 3 crossout in this deck, especially in Max C. I've said it before in a video and I'll say it again. I've seen, you know, people ask, what do you do against this, if you get Max C in this deck? And the answer is, well, you just cry. I mean, really, you just have to stop special summoning, which sucks, but... So if you're particularly afraid of Max C, maybe this isn't the deck for you, but if you like combos and you like birds, then I would go for it. Alright, so the last one that Road of the King has up here is Zodiac Tri Brigade, which we are very familiar with this deck, and some of you might see this list looks a little familiar. This is actually currently, I think, card for card, the exact build that I have, honestly. You know, this is where I got it from, to be quite frank. Now, I didn't have Nibiru's at first, right? I was using Whiptail and Ram, like the second copy of each. Still thinking about putting another Whiptail or maybe a second Thoroughblade in the deck, going back up to 4 Zodiac monsters. But yeah, I mean, I've tried variants of this build. I've tried, obviously, because obviously when I first started the channel, I didn't have the Oath and I didn't have the Nibiru, so there I was playing a variant. But even before I started recording videos, on my first climb up to Plat in Season 1, you know, I didn't have like 3 Maxi at first. I didn't have the Lightning Storms at first in the deck. I didn't have Harpy's Feather Duster at first in the deck. I was actually more pulling from builds I'd found on YouTube, and then I saw this build, and you know, the more I played, the more I was coming back to this build in my mind, right? More and more, I'm like, oh, now I see why they play the Harpy's Feather Duster. Oh, now I see why the Lightning Storms are good. Oh, now I see why you would want 3 Revolt instead of just 2. Oh, now I see why Max... Well, I mean, obviously I knew Max C was good, but... yeah, so I did eventually just end up settling on this build, and I gotta say, I'm immensely satisfied with it. At this point, I still haven't... I still haven't activated Nibiru's effect since adding him earlier today. But, you know, I'm hopeful for the future that Nibiru is going to be useful. But, you know, I'm still open that, hey, if we get to Plat 1 and Nibiru has been useless the whole time, maybe we do end up taking Nibiru out of the deck and we try some more cards. Again, just always being open-minded and never committing to one list is something you definitely want to be. But yeah, so you all obviously know my opinions about Zodiac Tri Brigade. I think it's the most well-balanced of the decks to ladder with, especially in best of 1 format. I don't necessarily think it's the strongest, because it doesn't have the most explosive boards. That would probably be Bird Up or Drytron. It's also not the most controlling. You know, that would be Elderlich. But Zodiac Tri Brigade hits that sweet spot right in the middle of the combo control spectrum. It is a little more combo than control, but it really does just hit that sweet spot where you can play it from just about any angle, right? This deck plays excellently going first. This deck plays very well going second. This deck plays well going into hand traps. You can play through multiple hand traps and still have really, really good plays. It's, again, why I've made this my main deck and committed so hard to it, is because, in my opinion, this is the best deck to ladder with. Again, you might have a deck you like more. It might not even be a tier 1 deck. It could be one of these other 80 decks. That's totally fine. But if you're like me and you're just like, I just want to get to Platinum 1 as quickly and ideally efficiently as possible, then this is the deck for you, in my opinion. So that is all of the decks that are here on the top of the list of Road to the King, but there is actually one more, and maybe even more than one more. I mean, tier lists are such a malleable thing, right? This tier list that I'm building, this tier 1, or list of tier 1 decks rather, is more based on my personal experience from what I've seen and played against. Because I know some people would consider stuff like Phantom Knights tier 1. I've seen some people say like Thunder variants, Thunder Dragon variants are tier 1. I've seen some people say that like Invoke, Dogmatica, Shadal are tier 1. I think those 3 decks are tier 2. I think they're very good decks. I think they're decks that you could very easily get to Platinum 1 with. I don't think there's anything wrong with those decks, but I do consider those tier 2. The other deck that's not on here that I personally consider tier 1, that's going to be Sky Striker. And it's it's actually the reason that I went into it first, right? I mentioned this in the Sky Striker deck profile video, but before I pulled the Shuregs, I was crafting stuff for and playing to build Sky Strikers. And then I pulled the Shuregs, and then I just happened to go into Tri Brigade, and then the rest is history. But yeah, so this is the Sky Striker build that Road of the King has. I would definitely make some adjustments for it in Master Duel, particularly in the hand trap department. I would not main deck Ghost Spells. I don't think it's very good in Master Duel, like ranked best of 1 format. Same with the Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. I think negating is far more important than destroying in this format in particular. I do agree with the Effect Veilers. Ideally, I would have some Effect Veilers. Again, I mentioned this in the Sky Striker video, but if I had more Ultra Craft points to spare, I would absolutely make Effect Veilers for the Sky Striker deck. This variant's playing 1 Nibiru, which I could see. We're playing 2 Nibiru just kind of like as a bit of a substitute for other hand traps. I'm kind of surprised this deck isn't playing like Imperms or Chalice. I mean, I'm not surprised it's not playing Imperms. Most Sky Striker decks, from what I've seen, they don't play Imperms, but yeah, I'm a little surprised that there's no like Forbidden Chalices here. I guess we're just relying on Widow Anchor for effect negation. And now that I think about it, especially when I was gathering those replays for the Sky Striker deck profile video, maybe 3 Chalice is too much. I could see myself cutting some copies of it. I could see myself going down to 1 and then maybe even less depending on how testing goes from there. I just really do like having the effect negation, the like unconditional effect negation, let's say. I mean, Widow Anchor is fairly unconditional for Sky Striker, for the Sky Striker deck as well. But honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's... Or rather, I think that Forbidden Chalice is still good for the deck, is what I meant to say. So, yeah, I would change up this build a little bit in the main deck. Like I said, I'd take out... I need to stop doing that. I would take out the Ghost Ogres and the Ghost Bells as well. And, I mean, you know, everything else looks fairly standard. Again, the extra deck is one thing I definitely need to learn better in Sky Striker. I also kind of wish I knew what, like, what this card was. It's an ultra rare, so I probably wouldn't make it, but I don't know. I see now why people are like, you need to post the lists of cards themselves in the videos. I have to apologize for that again, even though hopefully by now I've corrected that situation in those videos. Again, Sky Striker, I'm still like very much in the learning phase of the deck. I'm probably not going to play much more of it in ranked until I get to Platinum 1. But once I get to Platinum 1, I would like to kind of go all in this deck, maybe getting better at it, maybe even crafting some more cards to improve my build. Maybe like something like terraforming, or maybe some more stuff for the extra deck, maybe some Veilers, I'm not sure yet exactly what. But I do consider Sky Strikers Tier 1. I think they're a very good control deck. They're a little more combo-y than something like Elderlich. I think if you're going to go for the controlling route, you should probably just go for something like Elderlich. But overall, I do think Sky Strikers are a little more fun. And, I mean, hey, everyone likes their cards with anime waifus on them, don't we? Yeah, I guess that's about all I've got for this one. If I missed a deck, it's not my intention to insult it by saying it's not Tier 1. Again, any of these decks that are listed here could be optimized and piloted to Platinum 1. You do not have to play a Tier 1 deck to do well in this game, which is, I think, one of the things that's so great about it. Again, any of these could. And again, you can find this list at Road of the King. I think it's just roadoftheking.com. But, I mean, if you search Yu-Gi-Oh! Road of the King, it's like the first thing that comes up, so... Yeah, in any case, I guess that's about all I've got for you this time. Expect more replay videos probably coming up after this one, and yeah, we'll just keep looking for those in the future till we hit Plat 1, which again I expect to do in the next couple of days ideally. That's about all I've got for you though. So this is XLex signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.